All right guys, today's video is an exciting one. We're gonna be driving my 2023 Honda Civic Type R and a 2023 Hyundai Elantra N. We'll make some comparisons, talk about the nuances between both cars, and we'll get behind the wheel of both and give you guys some driving impressions. First, let's walk around this Type R, then we'll take it for a drive, and then we'll hop in the Elantra N. Before we get started, I've just gotta say, these are two of the best front-wheel drive performance cars I have ever driven. And also just two of the best performance cars I have ever driven. The driving engagement, the driving enjoyment, the track capability, and the practicality for daily use between both these cars is just outstanding. They're some of the best options in the market today for the enthusiast who maybe has a family or needs a little bit more space, where something like a smaller sports car isn't as practical, like the Supra or the BRZ GR86. These two cars check all of the boxes. So full disclosure, this is my personal Honda Civic Type R. You may notice it has some slightly different wheels on it. It's the middle of January and we're running a set of Continental DWS 06 tires in 265/40 R18. A little bit of a chunkier sidewall to handle our potholed Michigan roads. Those are wrapped on a set of BRAID Fullrace FF Wheels in 18x9.5. And as you can see, we've got a ton of brake caliper clearance. They look fantastic, and they ride a little bit better than stock too. So I'll do my best to make some comparisons today between stock versus stock. It is about 30 degrees out today, so the Elantra N is going to be struggling for traction on its Pilot Sport 4S tires, but we'll do our best to kind of work with the conditions and give you guys some thoughts on both of these cars. So let's start with a Type R, and let's start with just hopping in and firing it up. So I've owned this car for about 3 weeks now and put about 600 miles on it, just passed break-in. I am just in love with this thing. It is such a fantastic daily driver. It's an amazing performance car. Obviously, there's a big price difference between the Civic Type R and the Elantra N. For all practical purposes, this is now a $50,000 car, depending on what you've paid. The Elantra N is considerably less expensive. You can get into one of those for under 35 grand, depending on whether you're choosing the manual, and there's also a DCT option. The Civic Type R only comes in a 6-speed manual, as it was intended, but it's nice to have that option with the Elantra N. Both cars have 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engines. Civic Type R makes 315 horsepower, 310 pound-feet of torque. The Elantra N makes 276 horsepower. Both these cars have really solid aftermarkets. They can be tuned to even higher power numbers. The front differentials work phenomenally well on the street and the track. I personally think the Civic Type R is the better looking vehicle, especially with this new front end. The sleek lines, the design with this new FL5 generation is just fantastic. But the Elantra N isn't a bad looking vehicle either. The front end's just a little bit funky, but the rest of it I think works quite well. A little more subdued, especially without the big rear spoiler that's on the Type R. The Elantra N is more subtle and flies a bit more under the radar. Let's take a look in the back seat of the Type R. So, seated behind my driving position, I'm 5'10". I have just an expanse of legroom back here. Plenty of room for my knees. Headroom is great. I've got a couple inches above my head. Yeah, both cars have plenty of room in the back. You can fit a rearward-facing child seat, no issue. I've moved this seat up a couple notches, and it all works back here really well. Easy to get in and out of. Nice high roof line. Yeah, I mean, they're both about as practical of a sedan and hatchback as you need. Let's check out the back here. Tons of room in the back of this Type R. Of course, it's just a Civic, and it doesn't have a spare tire, so you get an even lower floor down here for even more space. You can fold down these rear seats, and it pretty much turns into SUV crossover levels of room. It's super practical, super spacious. The Elantra N does have a little bit of a knock against it since it has those bright red structural braces that impede a little bit on pass-through, but you can always unbolt those or squeeze things in between the bracing. Both cars feature a valved exhaust. The Civic Type R's is essentially silent. Can't really hear much except for boost and turbo noises, and the Elantra N makes a little bit better of a sound. It has a really nice difference between when the valve is open and closed. makes some pops and bangs. It's a really, really good sounding factory exhaust. And the Type R honestly leaves a little bit to be desired, especially with the piped in sound that Honda has kept in this FL5 generation. Doesn't sound as good as the Elantra N, and that's important. So, getting into the interior here. This is one of the places where I was most surprised with this new Civic Type R. Is just the high quality of everything. It feels even nicer than the standard Civic. The turn signal stalks, the door close feel, the little bits of Alcantara, the steering wheel leather, the shifter, everything is really nice and high quality. There are no reflective surfaces in here. This is all nice and matte black. This is a really nice material here. And gosh, these seats, wow. I just can't stop staring at these seats. We got red seat belts to match, a little bit of ambient lighting here in the door sill. Civic Type R build code here. I have number 802. Of course, we also get red carpets standard. I've replaced them with a set of rubber liners just to get through the winter. Civic Type R, just a fantastic cabin. Really very usable and easy to live with interior. Physical controls for everything. Wireless CarPlay. No handbrake though, and that is one knock against the Type R. I feel like every proper hot hatch should have a handbrake so you can do handbrake turns. This just has a button, so a little bit of a bummer. But one great thing with the new generation of Type R is you get this individual mode, and you can go in and customize a bunch of different parameters. Engine, steering, suspension, engine sound, rev match, and gauge cluster. You can all change these individually, whereas you weren't able to do that in the FK8 Type R. The Elantra N has all the customization that you could ever want. It has separate drive modes. It has an individual mode. It actually has two individual modes, two N modes that you can customize and set to whatever parameters you want. One disadvantage with the Type R is that you can only disable traction and stability control fully in Plus R mode. And to be honest, Plus R mode is just too stiff. Even on a racetrack, even on a smooth track with super aggressive Cup performance tires, Plus R mode just gets a little bit too bouncy. So what you have to do is you have to go in and do a pedal dance to fully disable everything, which just takes more time, and not everyone knows how to do that. Otherwise though, we get comfort, sport, and individual. You can see there's a slight change in the gauge clusters there too. Comfort is just a really nice, simple, minimalist gauge display. You can have screens on both sides showing you fuel economy, navigation, boost pressure, G meter, safety systems. Here's what our Type R reverse camera looks like. Kind of wide angle, kind of low res, but gets the job done. Ooh, this shifter is just fantastic. Like all Type Rs, it's metal, gets super cold in the winter and super hot in the summer if it's sit out in the sun, but it's part of the fun. And once you get the cabin kind of set to the temperature that you like, it does acclimate, but it takes a few minutes and you'll have a cold hand. You can get a little shift cozy for it. That's always a nice option. I have a nice little sweater that my buddy bought for me on Etsy. But for the most part, you can live with it. It's just one of the things that makes this car a little bit more interesting. All right, let's take this for a drive, see what it's like on the road, and we'll make some more comparisons with these two cars. So, settings. Let's go into individual mode. I pretty much have everything set to comfort in this mode. I have rev match turned off. One thing I like about the Elantra N is that you can quickly enable and disable rev matching. Civic Type R, you have to go through about 5 or 6 menus, which isn't ideal. But that said, I have been living with this car with rev match off, and I'm perfectly happy with it like that. The throttle is so responsive in this new Type R. As a result, it's super easy to rev match downshift, heel toe, and it just makes it that much more of an engaging and exciting driving experience. No rev hang. Boost comes on super quickly too. This 2-liter turbo from Honda is just a work of art. And it pulls so hard. This is such a fantastic chassis. Even in comfort mode, it's a bit stiff. The suspension is adaptive, and it will adapt to your driving style in each drive mode, irrespective if it's in Comfort, Sport, or Plus R. Somehow, the Elantra N manages to be a little bit quieter at speed than the Type R on the PS4S's. I don't know if it's a specific compound that Michelin tuned to the Elantra N versus what was put on the Type R. It could be the slightly thicker sidewall. The Elantra N has 35 series sidewalls as opposed to 30, which is on the Type R, and just that extra rigidity required from the tire structure could transmit some more noise too into the cabin. Also, I feel like the Type R just has a little bit less sound deadening in it for weight savings. This is still a pretty light car, under 3,200 pounds. And for how big it is, that's pretty good. I'm very impressed. I will say that today, on these wheels and tires, the Continental DWS 06, this is a much more livable daily setup than stock. It's so much quieter, and the ride quality is noticeably better than the 19s. I'm not going to get as much outright traction on these tires, but for daily use, for street driving, I find it a little bit more engaging to have a tire that can kind of let me move around a little bit. And the sacrifice is you don't get that razor sharp edge, that initial turn in, that really, really instant knife edge response from the front end. But as a result, I think it's a much more livable setup. And I feel like a lot of people who buy Civic Type Rs end up putting them on 18-inch wheels and tires. Again, throttle response, very little turbo lag in this Type R. You also notice that I've turned off my shift beep. You can do that in the menus. Just awesome. Let's go into Plus R mode. Let's listen to some of the weird noises that the Type R makes. Sounds like a Gran Turismo game. A bit unnatural, obviously fake engine noise piped in through the speakers or some type of module in the dashboard. Acura did a really nice job with the TLX, making that sound really good with a 2-liter turbo. I don't know why they could just use that for the Type R. I don't think Honda had enough of a development budget for this car to really develop a new sound for the engine, but luckily you can disable it, you can turn it off in individual mode, you can even go into the dashboard and unplug the whole module, which is what I may do eventually, we'll see. The advantage is that it does make the car a bit easier to hear on track in Plus R mode, but I just think it sounds kind of silly. Let's talk handling. We'll see what this Type R can do. Turn traction control off. I will say the Elantra N is just a monster around the corners. But I think the Type R has a little bit of an advantage. That stiffer suspension, the stiffer bushings, it gives us a more focused and serious nature in performance driving. There is just an insane amount of grip with this car. It almost feels like a slight class above the Elantra N, especially when you factor in the brakes. The brakes on this Type R are some of the best brakes I've felt in any car at any price. They're absolutely incredible. The initial bite, the pedal feel, how they last on track, even with stock pads, stock fluid, we were hammering on the brakes all day long at Sonoma Raceway, zero issues with fade. The Elantra N, I gotta give it credit, the Elantra N does really well also. It It doesn't have the bite, doesn't have the feel of the Type R, but they will last a long time on track and with minimal changes. You really don't have to change out the fluid. The stock pads work really well. Both cars do an excellent job with brake cooling and heat management in high performance driving scenarios, and both brake systems are really nice to drive on the street too. The Civic Type R though just feels like a much nicer, more expensive system, and it is. It's a Brembo brake system, whereas the Elantra N uses a Hyundai system. One thing we've got to talk about is wheel hop. The Elantra N has absolutely atrocious levels of wheel hop, and I think it's actually engine block hitting the firewall. I drove a modified Elantra N that had a couple of different engine mounts that were aftermarket, and that seemed to pretty much solve that entire issue. Type R, very well controlled, no issues with that. You can pretty much launch this thing, get some wheel spin out of it, and it just puts its power down and pulls itself out of the corner. That front diff is just magic in this car. It does a really nice job of putting traction down. There is a little bit of torque steer, but I think that's kind of fun too. Shifter. You can't beat the Type R shifter. This 6-speed manual is the best I've ever felt from Honda. It feels stronger, more robust, a little bit stiffer than the FK8 shifter, which could feel a little bit fragile sometimes and like you had to baby it. This, you can just bang gears. It's so satisfying to row through the gears in this car. Yeah, Honda got it right. It is nice to be able to drive this Type R without that shift beep. So here we are, even in comfort mode, and we're bouncing around pretty heavily there. There's that adaptive suspension going to work. Oh, let's talk cruise control. Type R has an adaptive cruise control system with lane centering with steering assist. The Elantra N just has steering assist. It does not have an adaptive system that will change speed. Honda really figured it out. It's one of the only manufacturers that offers an adaptive cruise control system with a manual transmission. So I got to give them credit there. This is a fantastic way to spend time on the highway. Yeah, it works if you want to change gears. It maintains its cruise control, speed. I mean, it's a pretty amazing system, actually, and it makes me wonder why more manufacturers haven't been able to implement this into their cars with manual transmissions. Really nice feature to have with this Type R. I think it's going to make a big difference on a daily basis and especially on road trips. All right, I think that's a pretty good drive on the Type R for now. We're going to be coming out with way more videos on this car. Let's go hop into the Elantra N and see what that's like behind the wheel. All right, we're back here with the Hyundai Elantra N. So we just drove the Type R. We made quite a few comparisons between the two already, but let's just walk you around this real quick. We've already made a few videos on this Elantra N, so a lot of what you see here won't be a huge surprise, but I do think the comparisons add some value. Let's start in the back here. You can see the structural brace back there, and it looks like there's even room for a spare tire in the back of this Elantra N. No real grab handle here to close the trunk. Let's start this up because I want to hear the exhaust idling a little bit. Put it into N mode. There we go. Just one of the best exhausts on sale today. And we get a handbrake. Look at that. Love it. Okay, so this is a sedan, not a hot hatch, but there's also the Kona N, which did win our 2022 Car of the Year award. Not as much of a looker as the Type R, but still, I think, a really neat looking sedan. Front end kind of reminds me a little bit of the RS3. We've got 19-inch wheels wrapped in 245/35 R19 Michelin Pilot Sport 4S tires. Hyundai Elantra N brakes. That exhaust does sound really good. Just chilling at idle in N mode. Back seat space. So I'm actually surprised. This feels a little bit more roomy back here than the Type R, especially with the distance between the front and rear seats. If you're going to be throwing child seats back here, you might have just a little bit more room for that rear-facing baby seat, which is an important factor. Let's sit behind myself, at least my driving position. I'm 5'10". A little bit more knee room, leg room, foot room is about the same as the Type R. No rear climate control vents, pretty Spartan back here. It is a 5-seater though. The Type R is only a 4-seater, so you can fit another passenger in this Elantra N. Interior is really nice on this Elantra N, but I will say the Type R does feel like a step above. It feels like a much higher quality item inside as far as materials, switchgear, feel, fit, finish. The contrast stitching looks good. The steering wheel materials, all your touch points are pretty nice, but again, just not quite as high quality of a space as the Type R. But honestly, at this price point, you can't really complain. This is a really nice car for $33,000, $34,000. And add in all the performance, it's just such a great value proposition. Both cars should get similar fuel economy numbers, low 20s in the city. Elantra N is slightly better rated for the highway, 31 miles to the gallon as opposed to 28 for the Type R, so might save a little bit at the pump there. Both cars can take regular fuel, though they recommend premium. All right, let's hop in this Elantra N and take it for a drive. So we've gone over this interior at length in some other videos, but just some highlights. The ergonomics here, like the Type R, are fantastic. Really nice fully digital gauge cluster here. You have a bunch of different drive modes. You can choose between normal, sport, eco, multiple different N modes where you can switch drive modes. You can change these buttons to provide different functions. It can be N Custom 1, N Custom 2. You can even have it start and stop a lap timer. There's standard N mode, which puts everything in stiff, the most aggressive settings, and then there's N Custom 1, N Custom 2, which you can set to your own parameters. So right now I have my N Custom 1 set to Engine in Sport Plus, exhaust sound in Sport, so no pops and bangs. We have rev matching engaged. It actually works really well on this Elantra N. Let's disable that though, just so both cars are kind of even in that respect. Here's what the key fob looks like. Here's your button to turn on and off rev matching. Not something that you have to go through a bunch of menus to do, unless if you're in your custom mode. You have to go into the custom mode and change that. Physical climate controls, a mechanical handbrake, which is my favorite feature of the Elantra N. Nice looking reverse camera. A lot of places to put things. Nice storage for your phone, water bottles, etc. A really nice cabin. Even these seats are quite good. They don't look as aggressive or crazy as the Type R's, but they're very comfortable and really well bolstered, nice and supportive too. No complaints there. The N logo even lights up at night, which is pretty special. Okay, let's go for a drive. No wireless CarPlay in the Elantra N, just a wired system. I think upon first impressions here, the inputs in the Type R are a bit more engaging and involving than the Elantra N. The shifter feel, the steering feel, the accelerator response, even the clutch feels a little bit, just feels a little bit more special than the Elantra N. But that said, this is just so good. This is such a fun car to drive. It makes all the right noises. It checks so many of those enthusiast boxes, and I think it does it better than the WRX. In some respects, it does it better than the BRZ GR86. This is just one of the best values on the market right now at the sub $50,000 price point. And one thing we didn't talk about with the Type R is availability and markups. You can buy an Elantra N now pretty easily. They're out there. You can even go out and get them at below MSRP. It's possible. Whereas the Type R, you're lucky if you get it at MSRP or 5 or 10 grand over MSRP. That's just supply and demand right now. They're only able to make very few cars. There's a really high demand because it's brand new. That could calm down over time. But it's the reality of the situation that we have right now, whereas this Elantra N is way, way more affordable and available than the Type R. All right, we're gonna let these tires warm up just a little bit. We talked a little bit about the wheel hop earlier. We want to avoid that as much as possible for today's drive. I'm a big fan of the gauge displays in this Elantra N. I think they just look fantastic. Really beautiful graphics, very clear. Makes this car feel just a bit more special. And that exhaust is perfect. No drone, it's not overbearing. It's just a nice, smooth, clean tone. One of the best sounding turbocharged 4-cylinders in my opinion. I just love it. Our suspension's in normal. It's very comfortable. A little bit of road noise, a little bit of wind noise, a little bit of tire noise. Nothing out of the ordinary for a vehicle in this class. It's a little bit quieter than the Type R on the same tire. So if you compare it, Pilot Sport 4S to Pilot Sport 4S, the Type R is a little bit louder, more road noise, more impact noise over bumps. The Elantra N, I think, has slightly better NVH. Wind noise seems about the same. Of course, on the Continentals, I think the Type R is a little bit quieter now, and same would be for the Elantra N too. Actually, I've driven both these cars on Continental DWS 06s, and the Elantra N felt fantastic on that tire too. It's a really nice all-around, all-season tire. Elantra N doesn't quite have the tack sharp throttle response of the Type R, even in engine Sport Plus mode. Even though I don't like this shifter as much as the Type R, it is still a really nice 6-speed manual. Nice, short, concise, precise throws. A little bit rubbery, but one of the better manuals out there. The dual clutch in this car is also phenomenal. I think if you want the slightly more engaging driving experience though, you got to go for the manual. And the exhaust is a bit rowdier in the manual cars too. This is full N mode. I think the Elantra N is just a little bit more fun just because of the noises that it makes. You've got that handbrake for when you want it. Let's do a quick launch here. Brakes definitely feel more normal production car. So much fun. Doesn't have the power of the Type R. Doesn't feel as fast. We've got a little bit of a horsepower deficit here, and that's okay. That said though, there's some great tunes out there for the Elantra N, Kona N. We drove one of these cars with a 300 horsepower tune on the track earlier last year, and it was fantastic. I'd be very curious to compare that to the Type R and Gingerman in the spring. Yeah, still no slouch. I find myself missing some heel toe downshifts in this car. The pedals aren't placed ideally. Just incredible grip there, though. Wow. Let's turn on rev matching. Just because we can very easily. I think ultimately both rev match systems are about equal. They're both very good. A big improvement in the FL5 Type R compared to the FK8, just a little bit sharper, a little bit more responsive, more reliable. Neither system seems to get tripped up, and yeah, the Elantra N's got a great rev match system too. It also has heated seats. No heated steering wheel, unfortunately, but yeah, Type R, you gotta live without heated seats. The way it pulls out of corners, both these cars, the way they put their power down is just incredible. So, some final thoughts. Elantra N puts a smile on your face every time. It's really fun to drive. It's the better value. Type R, one of the most special feeling and driving cars I think I've ever been in. It's up there with some of the greats. The shifter feel, the brakes, the steering, the engine response, the way that car satisfies on a visceral and engaging level is unmatched in the class and unmatched in a lot of cars under $100,000, to be honest. It's a truly special driving experience. It feels like a higher quality item than the Elantra N. It feels like it's built better. There's a level of precision to the way that car drives, feels. I think it looks a little bit better too. It's just a very, very special vehicle. There are definitely some things that I don't like about the Type R that I wish Honda did differently. But at the end of the day, they're just both two fantastic options. And we're so lucky to be able to get them now in this day and age. And if you can get your hands on a Type R, great, go for it. But I think if you want better value and you don't want to shell out 50 grand, this Elantra N is just a really, really good option too. And I would also really recommend the Kona N too. That was so much fun the week we had it. A little bit more hardcore, a little bit more tail happy, a little bit stiffer than the Elantra N. Kind of a little bit closer to the Type R suspension tuning in some ways. But still a really, really fun package. And I think the Kona N is the most fun between the three. I think what the Type R lacks in smile factor makes up for in just sheer impressiveness in terms of its performance and capabilities. That car is always just wowing you around corners. And the things that that thing can do on track are unbelievable. It really is kind of in a class of its own. It feels like a tier above the Elantra N, Kona N in some ways. There's also the idea of the Type R being a little bit more of an icon and it having some pedigree and a lot of history. And the Elantra N is, you know, a pretty relatively new product. Still, Hyundai's knocked it out of the park here, and Honda has taken a platform and refined it to a new level that I think is just really, really special. These are both cars that I would take over a lot of competitors, even all-wheel drive and rear-wheel drive options. I think the best thing about both of these cars, the Elantra N and the Type R, is that they are so usable day to day, so livable, so practical, but yet you can also go out and take them out on the track and they'll heat manage and last all day long out on a road course. It's just amazing the versatility that you get with both of these options from the factory. And that's usually something that you have to pay a lot more money for. Okay guys, well hopefully that gave you an idea of what these two cars are like to drive, live with, and experience. We're going to be doing some more videos on these two in the spring. I would love to get both cars out on track and really do a nice comparison out there, see which is quicker, see how they feel. And but if you want to know more, go check out our individual reviews on the Elantra N and the Type R for more info. It's been a pleasure to really be able to experience both these cars together back to back this week. I love this Elantra N. It's just so much fun, and I really have been enjoying my Type R. Two truly special options for enthusiasts, and cars that just do it all, which is a pretty awesome thing this day and age. So anyway, that'll be it for this one. Thanks for watching, guys. We'll see you in the next video. Take care.